Most people have a general familiarity with the game of soccer. Just some players on a large grass field, a ball, generally black and white, and a goal. And when I was a senior company grade officer in the military, I had a battalion commander in the reserves during annual training at Fort Leonard Wood wanted to provide some officer professional development one morning, OPD, by playing a game of what he had called suicide soccer, which was like normal soccer in every other way except that we would be playing the game not just with one, but a total of 5 soccer balls. And even as senior company grade officers, I will admit that it took us a little while to satisfy the training objectives during that period of instruction. It always takes a little time to understand new material. And marking the 4th year since a novel coronavirus had first emerged in China in December 2019, looking at masking guidance, the first experience that came to mind for me was our game in officer professional development, playing suicide soccer. Hello, my name is Major Mike Webb, and for 2 decades, probably one of the obligations that most consumed my time was in the area of what we describe as force protection, which is exactly what it sounds like. Keeping soldiers safe to complete a mission and return home safely to their family, friends, and loved ones. And for purposes of illustration, for the next few moments, let's just use the game of soccer, suicide soccer, as a graphic representation of the COVID-19 pandemic. And just think of that goalpost at the far ends of a soccer field as your life and health in a pandemic. And think of that goalkeeper standing between the players on the field and the net as your extra layer of protection, provided by a cloth facial covering, to which many have actually improperly described as masks, which is the proper word for medical grade respiratory protection, quite distinct from what you have been mandated or even volunteered to wear as your extra layer of protection. And at least in soccer, those who want to protect their goal probably want a fairly effective player standing in front of the net to serve as goalie, and not just someone passing time who may or may not be effective at blocking shots. Especially for those who tend to be visual learners, I believe that this example should be able to assist you in developing a better visual image to help you to understand your situation in what has become a global public health crisis, your game in suicide soccer. Until an invisible enemy showed up at your playing field, you probably did not spend a lot of time considering the topic of respiratory protection. You had other things on your mind. But the folks at the CDC and the NIAID and even the NIOSH did, because they are regulatory agencies that have a mission of protecting public health. And in fact, as early as around 2005 and 2006, both the CDC and the NIAID had devoted research papers to the topic of masking guidance during the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, a topic that had developed some level of discussion in the press at the beginning of the implementation of masking guidance across the country, but about which probably most of you have long forgotten. And in those very early discussions, folks like Dr. Anthony Fauci and CDC had considered what you may consider to be that extra layer of protection, your goalie protecting your life goal, as merely a simple barrier, not to protect the wearer from airborne contaminants, but rather had referred to them as source control. Source control because these improvised cloth coverings were hydrophilic. That's a term. Hydrophilic devices that could facilitate rapid evaporation of droplets. It's just water being expelled by an infected person. And being made of porous cloth, these devices could absorb at least 90% of the water droplets that were being expelled in exhalation events like coughing, sneezing, and even talking. Or basically, a giant sneeze guard to be dummy corded to your face to prevent you from infecting others, but still permitting around 10% of those droplets, possibly containing contaminants, to escape. But evolutionary pressures tend to give rise to evolving science, and with mounting infections and fatalities, there was considerable concern, just from a reputation and trust standpoint, that persons involved in public health professions, essential workers, might be deprived of medical grade protection like N95s that might be hoarded by non-essential people, just like in the toilet paper shortages that had occurred early in the pandemic, and which you may recall. And they had realized that persons in panic would want some assurances, if only to provide therapeutic feelings of empowerment and efficacy during times historically associated with fear, confusion, and despair. But basically, just like a safety blanket that Linus on the Charlie Brown Peanuts character cartoons had carried. Some may have heard of the NIOSH, or the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, but may not be aware that it is an agency within the CDC. And in 2010, over a decade ago in the Obama administration, they had taken the deliberate time to devote to what is often described as a challenge study or simulated challenge study during contingency planning to test substitutes for respiratory grade protection, like the goalies that are now providing your extra layer of protection, with at least the hope of protecting that goal behind it from those invisible players on the field, and using the very same diagnostic equipment that is used to rate the N95 and other medical grade respiratory protection. Had they determined that your extra layer of protection goalie would be effective, there would have been no need for evolving science during a global public health crisis, which should just be common sense. And you look like an intelligent person. When a person coughs or sneezes, the largest droplets, measuring 10 microns or larger, do not even require any effort to block, because they are so large that they will succumb to gravity and hit the ground in less than a second. But still, 10% of those droplets being expelled will go through to potentially present a threat to others. And just think about if 10% of the droplets could break through going out in a cough or a sneeze or even singing, then it would be reasonable, just based upon volume, that at least 10% of the inbound particles or droplets coming at your goalie should be expected to break through your extra layer of protection. And then the critical question becomes exactly how many times that invisible enemy or team on the field has to get past your goalie, providing an extra layer of protection. And unfortunately, according to the CDC, the infectious dose of SARS-CoV-2 needed to transmit infection has not yet been established. And you look like an intelligent person. This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.